I heard footsteps behind me in the empty warehouse, and my heart stopped. Everything I'd built was about to crumble because of one person's greed. My name is Rachel Winters, and I'm a real estate developer. I trusted my sister with everything, my business, my secrets, my future. That trust destroyed me, the perfect partnership. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I signed the final page. My sister Elena sat across from me at the conference table, her smile bright and confident. She picked up her own pen and signed her name right below mine. We were official business partners now, equal owners of Winters Development Company. "We did it, Rachel," Elena said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Mom and Dad would be so proud." I smiled back at her. Our parents had always dreamed of seeing us work together. They'd built their own small business when we were kids, and they always said family was the strongest foundation. Now Elena and I were carrying on that dream with our luxury apartment project downtown. We walked to the small kitchen in my office, and I pulled out a bottle of champagne I'd been saving. I popped the cork and poured 2 glasses. The bubbles sparkled in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. "To the Harbor View Apartments," I said, raising my glass. "And to the best partnership in the business." Elena clinked her glass against mine. "To us. Sisters forever, partners for life." We both took a sip. The champagne was sweet and cold. I felt a surge of happiness in my chest. This project was going to change everything for us. We'd already secured the land and preliminary permits. Tomorrow we had a meeting with our main investor, Marcus Chen, to finalize the funding. $20 million. It was the biggest deal of my career. "I can't wait for the investor meeting tomorrow," I said, setting down my glass. "Marcus is bringing his whole team. This is really happening." Elena's smile grew even wider. Too wide, actually. Her teeth showed and her eyes got this strange gleam. It was just for a second, then her expression softened again. But I'd seen it. Something about the way she'd reacted felt wrong. "Yeah, can't wait," she said, looking down at her champagne. "It's going to be perfect." I pushed the strange feeling away. This was my sister. We'd shared a bedroom growing up. She'd been my maid of honor at my wedding before my divorce. She was the person I trusted most in the world. If I couldn't trust Elena, who could I trust? That evening, after Elena left, I sat at my computer setting up the business accounts. I created shared access for both of us. Every bank account, every investment portfolio, every vendor payment system. I typed in Elena's email address and hit the button to give her full administrative access. She was my partner now. She needed to see everything, control everything, just like me. I clicked the final confirmation button and leaned back in my chair. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Thanks for trusting me, sis. I won't let you down." I smiled and typed back. "I know you won't. We're in this together." But as I turned off my computer and locked up the office, that image of her too wide smile flashed through my mind again. I shook my head and grabbed my coat. I was just being paranoid. Elena would never hurt me. We were family. Cracks in the foundation. 3 weeks later, I returned to the office at 11 at night. I'd left my phone charger on my desk and needed it for an early morning site visit. The building was dark, except for the security lights in the hallway. I used my key card to unlock the main door and walked toward my office. Light spilled out from under my door. Someone was inside. My pulse quickened as I approached. I pushed the door open slowly. Elena sat at my desk, hunched over her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The moment she heard the door, she jumped and slammed the laptop shut. Her face went pale. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, stepping inside. "It's almost midnight." Elena laughed, but it sounded forced. She stood up quickly and grabbed her laptop, holding it against her chest. "I couldn't sleep. You know how I get when we have a big project going. I just wanted to check our budget numbers, make sure everything adds up before the next investor meeting." I walked to my desk and picked up my phone charger. "You could have done that from home. We have shared access to everything now." I know. I just think better here, in the office." She moved toward the door. I was actually just leaving. As she brushed past me, her phone screen lit up in her pocket. I caught a glimpse of the notification. It was an email from Marcus Chen, our main investor. The preview text said, "Per our discussion earlier." My stomach dropped. "Elena, was that an email from Marcus?" She pulled her phone out and glanced at the screen. Her expression didn't change. "Oh, yeah. He was just confirming our meeting time next week. Nothing important." "Why is he emailing you directly?" All investor communication is supposed to go through me first. That's what we agreed. Elena waved her hand dismissively. Rachel, relax. He probably just hit reply on an old email thread. You're reading too much into it. She smiled at me, that same too wide smile from before. You're stressed. That's understandable. This is a huge project, but you need to trust me. We're partners, remember? I wanted to argue. I wanted to grab her phone and read that email, but she was my sister, and she was right. I was stressed. Maybe I was overreacting. Okay, I said finally. But next time, let me know if Marcus contacts you directly. I need to stay in the loop. Of course, absolutely. Elena gave me a quick hug. Get some sleep, sis. We both need it. She left and I stood alone in my office. The room felt cold suddenly. I sat down at my desk and opened my computer, logging into our shared accounts. Everything looked normal. All the numbers matched. The budget was on track. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I opened a new document and started typing. I titled it Things to Watch. Under it, I wrote, Elena in office late at night said checking budget numbers. Closed laptop quickly when I arrived. Email from Marcus on her phone. She said it was just meeting confirmation. Her reaction seemed nervous. I saved the document in a private folder and locked my computer. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was a terrible sister for doubting Elena. But my instincts had built this business, and right now, they were screaming that something wasn't right. The anonymous tip pool weeks passed. I tried to forget about the incident in my office, but I kept noticing small things. Elena would get phone calls and step outside to take them. She started scheduling meetings without telling me first. Once I found her in the conference room with papers spread everywhere. When I asked what she was working on, she'd gathered them up quickly and said it was just preliminary sketches. Then one morning, I found the USB drive. It was sitting on my driver's seat when I got to my car after a client breakfast. No note, no envelope, just a plain black USB drive. I sat in my car holding it, my heart pounding. Someone had broken into my locked car to leave this. That meant it was important. Or dangerous, maybe both. I drove straight to my office and locked my door. I plugged the USB drive into my computer. My hands were shaking. The screen loaded and a folder appeared with dozens of files inside. PDFs, spreadsheets, scanned documents. I opened the first PDF. It was a contract for the Harbor View project, but I'd never seen this version before. The payment terms were different. The investor percentages were wrong, and at the bottom, Elena's signature. I opened another document. Another contract I'd never approved. Elena's signature, again. Then a spreadsheet showing money transfers I didn't recognize. Thousands of dollars moving from our accounts to somewhere else. My vision blurred. I felt like I might throw up. I opened document after document, and they all told the same story. Elena had been forging contracts, creating fake paperwork, moving money without my knowledge. My sister was stealing from me, from our company, from everything we'd built together. I pulled out my phone to call her, but stopped. If I confronted her now, she'd just deny it. She'd say the documents were fake or taken out of context. I needed to be smart about this. I needed proof that would hold up in court. I copied all the files from the USB drive to my computer and saved them in 3 different locations. Then I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Who had sent me this drive? And how did they know what Elena was doing? I thought about that email from Marcus I'd seen on her phone. Had he discovered what she was doing? Was he trying to warn me, or was he somehow involved? I picked up my desk phone and called our bank. Hi, this is Rachel Winters. I need to review all account activity for the past 3 months. Can you email me detailed statements? The representative said yes, and I gave her my personal email, not the shared one Elena could access. Then I opened my Things to Watch document and started adding everything I'd found. The forged contracts, the unauthorized money transfers. I noted the exact amounts and dates. This was evidence now. This was proof that my own sister had betrayed me. My office door was locked, but I still felt exposed. If Elena knew someone had given me this information, what would she do? Would she try to destroy evidence? Would she empty our accounts and disappear? I looked at Elena's signature on the forged documents. The handwriting was perfect. She'd practiced this. She'd planned this carefully. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was calculated theft. My sister had looked me in the eye for months while stealing from me. She'd hugged me and called me her partner while plotting to destroy everything I'd built. The betrayal cut deeper than any business loss. This was family. This was supposed to be forever. I wouldn't confront her yet. I needed more information first. I needed to understand the full scope of what she'd done, and then I'd make her pay for every lie she'd told me. Following the money trail, I hired a private investigator the next day. His name was David Martinez, and he specialized in corporate fraud. I met him at a coffee shop far from my office where no one would recognize us. I brought copies of everything from the USB drive. "How long do you need?" I asked him. David looked through the documents, his expression serious. "Give me 2 weeks. I'll find out where the money went and who your sister is working with." Working with? I hadn't considered that Elena might have help. "You think someone else is involved?" "People don't usually do this alone," David said, "especially not on this scale. Someone's giving her advice or support. I'll find out who." The waiting was torture. I had to see Elena every day at work and pretend everything was fine. We sat in meetings together. We reviewed project timelines. She'd smile at me and I'd smile back, even though I wanted to scream at her. Finally, David called. "I have something you need to see. Can you come to my office?" I drove there immediately. David had a small office in a building downtown. When I walked in, he had photos and documents spread across his desk. My stomach clenched. "Your sister has been meeting with your competitors," David said, pointing to surveillance photos. "This is Gerald Thompson from Thompson Development. She's met with him 6 times in the past 2 months." I picked up one of the photos. Elena sat at an outdoor cafe with Gerald, leaning in close like they were old friends. Gerald Thompson had tried to buy my company twice. I'd turned him down both times. "What are they talking about?" I asked. David handed me a report. "She's been selling your project plans and client lists. Everything you've developed, she's giving to him. Look at these dates. Every time you finished a new design phase, she met with Gerald within 48 hours. I felt sick. For how much money? Hard to say exactly, but look at this." David pulled up video footage on his computer. It showed Elena leaving Gerald's office building. She carried a large envelope. Even on the grainy security footage, I could see how thick it was. "Cash payments," David said. "She's been doing this for at least 4 months, probably longer. I estimate she's taken between $300,000 and $500,000 from you so far." The room spun. $500,000. My own sister had sold me out for $500,000. Money I would have shared with her anyway. Money she would have earned legitimately as my partner. "There's more," David said quietly. "The forged contracts. She's been creating fake vendor agreements and pocketing the difference. When you think you're paying $50,000 for permits, the real cost is $30,000. She's keeping the extra 20. I sat down hard in the chair. Why would she do this? We were partners. She was going to make millions from this project legally. David shook his head. "People get greedy, Ms. Winters. Maybe she didn't want to wait. Maybe she wanted it all for herself. Or maybe someone convinced her she deserved more than half." I looked at the photos again. Elena's face in each one looked happy, relaxed. She wasn't stressed about betraying me. She was enjoying it. This wasn't a desperate person making a bad choice. This was someone who'd planned every step. "I need everything documented," I told David. "Every meeting, every payment, every forged document. I want a complete timeline of everything she's done." "Already working on it," David said. "Give me 3 more days and you'll have a full report with evidence that will hold up in court." I drove home that night, thinking about our childhood. Elena and I had shared everything growing up. When she wanted to go to art school but couldn't afford it, I'd helped her pay for classes. When my marriage fell apart, she'd let me stay in her spare room for 2 months. We were supposed to be each other's person, but somewhere along the way, Elena had changed. Or maybe she'd always been this way, and I'd been too blind to see it. Maybe she'd always been jealous of my success, my business, my life. Maybe this partnership was just her way of getting close enough to destroy me. I wouldn't let her succeed. I'd worked too hard to build my company. I'd sacrificed too much. If Elena wanted a war, I'd give her one. But I'd make sure I won. The confrontation set up, I spent 3 days planning exactly how this would go. David delivered his final report, over 200 pages of evidence documenting every lie, every theft, every betrayal. I read it all, memorizing the details. I wanted to know more about Elena's crimes than she did. I decided to confront her at our warehouse office. We'd bought an old warehouse on the waterfront as temporary headquarters while we developed the Harbor View project. It was private, isolated, and far from prying eyes. Perfect for what I had in mind. I called Elena on Tuesday morning. "We need to meet tonight at the warehouse, 8 o'clock. "What's wrong?" she asked. I could hear the concern in her voice. Fake concern. The investors are having second thoughts about the financing structure. We need to go through all of the contracts and make sure everything's solid before our meeting with them tomorrow. Elena was quiet for a moment. I wondered if she was trying to figure out if I knew something. Okay, she said finally. I'll be there. I called my lawyer next. Susan Crawford had handled my business for 5 years. She was tough, smart, and didn't take any nonsense from anyone. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said, I'll be there at 7:30 with everything we need. Don't confront her until I arrive. Then I called David Martinez. I need you there too, as a witness and for security. I don't know how she'll react when I show her the evidence. I'll be there, David said. 7:45. That evening, I arrived at the warehouse at 7. The building was dark and empty. I turned on the lights in the main office space and set up everything on the long conference table. I printed every page of David's report, every photo of Elena meeting with Gerald Thompson, every forged contract with her signature, every bank statement showing unauthorized transfers. I organized it all into a thick folder. On top, I placed a single photo, Elena and Gerald at that cafe, her smiling and relaxed while she destroyed my life. Susan arrived right on time. She wore a dark suit and carried her briefcase. You ready for this? I don't have a choice, I said. She's my sister, and she's been stealing from me for months. I have to stop her. The evidence is solid, Susan said. We can file charges tonight if you want. Fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. She's looking at serious prison time. My stomach twisted. Prison. My sister in prison because of me, but she'd done this to herself. She'd made these choices. I couldn't protect her from the consequences. David arrived a few minutes later. He stayed near the door, quiet and watchful. I positioned myself at the head of the conference table with the folder in front of me. Susan sat to my right. Everything was ready. At 8 o'clock exactly, I heard a car pull up outside. A door slammed. Footsteps approached. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was it. Everything was about to change. The warehouse door opened and Elena walked in. She wore jeans and a sweater, looking casual and comfortable. When she saw Susan and David, she stopped. Her smile faded. What's going on? She asked. Who are these people? I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, and I'm asked Elena. We need to talk. She didn't move. Her eyes darted from me to Susan to David and back again. I could see her mind working, trying to figure out what I knew. Sit down, I repeated, and this time my voice was hard. Now. Elena walked slowly to the chair and sat. She folded her hands on the table, trying to look calm, but I saw her fingers trembling. I slid the folder across the table. It made a soft sound against the wood. Open it. When the truth came out, Elena stared at the folder like it might bite her. She didn't move to open it. Her face had gone pale, all the color draining away. She knew. Before she even looked inside, she knew I'd discovered everything. Open it, I said again, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. She reached out with shaking hands and flipped open the cover. The photo of her and Gerald Thompson stared up at her. She looked at it for a long moment, then started flipping through the pages. Forged contracts, bank statements, surveillance photos, the evidence of every lie she'd told me. Rachel, I can explain, she started, but her voice cracked. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't you dare try to explain this away. I know everything, Elena. I know about Gerald Thompson. I know you've been selling our project plans to him for months. I know about the forged contracts and the money you've stolen. I know about every single lie you've told me since the day we became partners. Elena's eyes filled with tears. It's not what it looks like. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Really? Because it looks like my own sister has been systematically destroying my business while pretending to be my partner. It looks like you've stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from me. It looks like you've committed fraud and embezzlement. I was going to give it back, Elena said desperately. I just needed the money temporarily. I was going to put it all back before you noticed. Liar. The word came out cold and hard. You've been meeting with Gerald for 4 months. You've sold him every single one of our designs. You've given him our client lists, our vendor contacts, our financing strategies. That's not temporary, Elena. That's sabotage. She started crying in earnest now, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand the pressure I was under. You don't know what it's like to always be in your shadow. You're the successful one, the smart one, the one everyone respects. I just wanted something of my own. So you decided to steal mine? I stood up, my hands flat on the table. I gave you half my company. I made you an equal partner. You would have made millions from this project legitimately. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? Elena shook her head, still crying. It's not that simple. There were other factors, other people involved. That's when I heard them. Footsteps behind me, coming from the back of the warehouse. I spun around, my heart jumping into my throat. Someone had been listening this whole time. Someone had been hiding in the shadows. A man stepped into the light. Elena's husband, Mark. I hadn't seen him when I arrived. He must have been here all along, waiting in one of the back rooms. His face was calm, almost amused, like this was all some kind of game. Hello, Rachel, he said quietly. I think it's time we had a real conversation about what's been going on. David moved closer to me, his hand going to something at his belt. Susan stood up, her expression hard. Elena looked at her husband with something like relief, like his presence somehow made everything better. But I felt ice spread through my veins. This wasn't just about Elena anymore. Mark was involved too. And from the way he was looking at me, I realized this conspiracy went much deeper than I'd imagined. What are you doing here? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Mark smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I've been here the whole time. After all, Elena and I are a team. We do everything together. He walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty warehouse. Including planning how to take everything you've built and make it ours, the bigger conspiracy. Mark walked around the table, standing behind Elena's chair. He put his hands on her shoulders, a possessive gesture that made my skin crawl. Elena looked up at him with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it love or fear? You think this was all Elena's idea? Mark said, his voice conversational like we were discussing the weather. You think she just woke up one day and decided to betray her sister? Don't, Elena whispered to him, but he ignored her. No, Rachel. This was my plan from the beginning. From the day you first mentioned making Elena your partner, I saw the opportunity. I encouraged her. I set up the meetings with Gerald Thompson. I taught her how to forge the contracts. My hands clenched into fists. What did I ever do to you? Mark laughed. You didn't do anything. But you have something I want. A successful business, valuable connections, real estate worth millions. Elena was always too soft, too loyal to you. She would never have done this on her own. He squeezed her shoulders. But I convinced her. I showed her that you'd been holding her back her whole life, that you'd made yourself the star while she was just your assistant. That's not true, I said, looking at Elena. I made you an equal partner. I gave you everything. You gave her scraps, Mark said. 50% of a company she helped build. But why settle for 50 when you can have it all? David stepped forward. That's enough. You've just admitted to conspiracy to commit fraud and embezzlement. Everything you're saying is being recorded. Mark's smile didn't fade. He pulled out his phone and held it up. So am I. And I'm documenting how Rachel Winters has been engaging in illegal business practices. How she's been bribing city officials to fast-track her permits. How she's been using undocumented workers on her construction sites. He looked directly at me. None of it's true, of course. But by the time we're done leaking these accusations to the press, your reputation will be destroyed. Even if you prove their lies, the damage will be done. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just theft. This was a complete takedown. They'd planned to destroy me professionally and personally. We've already transferred most of the shared funds to offshore accounts, Mark continued. The Harborview project? We sold the development rights to Gerald Thompson yesterday. He's filing his own permits tomorrow. By the time you try to fight it in court, he'll have broken ground and you'll be tied up in legal battles for years. I couldn't breathe. Everything I'd worked for was gone. Not just the money, the project itself, my reputation, my future. They'd taken it all. You won't get away with this, Susan said firmly. We have evidence of everything you've done. The courts will take months or years, Mark interrupted. And in the meantime, we'll be long gone. Elena and I are leaving the country tomorrow. By the time any legal action catches up with us, we'll be living comfortably in a country with no extradition treaty. Elena finally spoke, her voice small. Mark, maybe we should... Should what? He snapped at her. Back down now? We've come too far. This is happening. I realized then that Elena wasn't a willing partner in this. Mark had manipulated her, pushed her, maybe even threatened her. She looked scared. Not of me, of him. But that didn't erase what she'd done. She'd still signed the forged documents. She'd still met with Gerald. She'd still betrayed me. Whether it was her idea or Mark's didn't matter. The damage was real. My phone was in my pocket. Throughout this entire conversation, it had been recording. Mark didn't know that. He thought he was so smart, so in control. But I'd learned from my mistake with Elena. I'd started recording the moment I arrived at the warehouse. I had every word, every admission, every threat. And if Mark thought he could destroy me and walk away, he was about to learn how wrong he was. You're right, I said slowly, pulling out my phone. The courts do take time, but police investigations move much faster, especially when they have a recorded confession. Mark's face changed. The smug confidence vanished, replaced by sudden understanding. I held up my phone, the recording app clearly visible on the screen. Everything you just said is documented, I told him. Your conspiracy, your admission of fraud, your threats against me, and the best part, I have 3 witnesses here who watched you confess to everything. Mark's hand moved fast, reaching for my phone. But David was faster. He stepped between us, his body a solid wall. Touch her, and I call the police right now, he said quietly. You're already looking at serious charges. Don't add assault to the list. Elena stood up from her chair, backing away from Mark. This wasn't supposed to happen like this, she said, her voice breaking. You said it would be simple. You said no one would get hurt. Mark whirled on her. Shut up! Just shut up! But Elena kept talking, the words spilling out like she'd been holding them in too long. He said we'd just take some money and leave, that you'd never even notice, but then it got bigger and bigger. I wanted to stop, but he said it was too late. He said if I backed out, he'd tell you it was all my idea and leave me to face the consequences alone. She looked at me, her eyes desperate. I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. You're my sister. But you did it anyway, I said. The words felt like stones in my mouth. You chose him over me. You chose money over family. And now you both have to face what you've done. Building my case, Susan pulled out her phone and called the police. They arrived within 15 minutes. David had already contacted them before the meeting, warning them that we might need backup. 2 officers walked into the warehouse, and I handed them my phone with the recording. Mark tried to leave. He actually pushed past David and ran for the door. But the police were faster. They had him in handcuffs within seconds. Elena didn't run. She just stood there crying while one of the officers read her rights. Rachel, please, she begged as they led her away. Please don't do this. I'm your sister. I didn't answer. I just watched as they put her in the back of the police car next to Mark. The red and blue lights flashed across the warehouse walls. This was really happening. My own sister was going to jail. The next morning, I met with Susan and David at my office. My real office downtown, not the warehouse. Susan had a plan already laid out. We file criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, she said, ticking off items on her legal pad. The police have your recording and David's investigation. That's solid evidence. They'll both be charged. What about the civil case? I asked. My voice sounded hollow. We sue for damages, full restitution of all stolen funds, plus compensation for harm to your business reputation and future earnings. I estimate we can get between $2 and $5 million awarded. $5 million. From my sister, the number felt unreal. David spoke up. I froze the offshore accounts already. I have contacts in banking. The funds are secured until the court decides what happens to them. They won't be able to access that money. I nodded slowly. What about Gerald Thompson? He bought the development rights to Harborview. Susan smiled grimly. That sale is illegal. Your sister didn't have the authority to sell those rights. We'll get an injunction blocking Thompson from moving forward with any development. He'll lose every penny he paid her, and he might face charges himself for knowingly purchasing stolen property. Over the next week, I worked around the clock. I contacted every client we had. I explained the situation carefully. My partner had been stealing. She'd acted without my knowledge or consent. She was now facing criminal charges. I assured them that Winter's development was still solid, still trustworthy. Some clients believed me immediately. Thomas Reeves, who'd been working with me for 3 years, called me as soon as he heard. Rachel, I know you. You're the most honest person in this business. If you say you didn't know, I believe you. Others needed convincing. I showed them the evidence. I let them see the police reports and David's investigation. Slowly, one by one, they agreed to continue working with me. The investors were harder. Marcus Chen met with me in person, his face grave. Rachel, you understand my position. My firm can't be associated with fraud. We need to protect our reputation. I understand, I said. But I'm the victim here. I was defrauded by my own partner. I caught her. I turned her in. Doesn't that prove my integrity? Marcus considered this. Show me your plan going forward. How will you restructure? How will you ensure this never happens again? I'd prepared for this question. I pulled out a detailed document outlining new oversight procedures, third-party audits, and a completely restructured management system. I'm implementing triple authentication for all financial transactions. Every contract will be reviewed by both my lawyer and an independent auditor. No single person will have full access to funds anymore. Marcus read through the plan carefully. Finally, he nodded. Okay, we'll continue with the Harbor View project, but I want monthly reports and full transparency. Done, I said, relief flooding through me. The hardest part was dealing with my family. My parents called me crying. How could you do this to your sister? My mother said. She made a mistake. Can't you forgive her? She stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from me, Mom. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated theft over months. But she's family, Bon, my father said. Family forgives, I wanted to scream. Why was I the bad person for reporting a crime? Why should I forgive someone who deliberately tried to destroy my life? If you want to support Elena, that's your choice, I said quietly. But I won't drop the charges. She did this. She has to face the consequences. My parents hung up on me. They chose her side. Even after everything she'd done, they chose her. That hurt almost as much as her betrayal. But I couldn't think about that now. I had a business to save, the public exposure. 2 weeks later, I held a press conference. Susan advised me to get ahead of the story before the media twisted it into something ugly. We set it up in the main conference room of my office building. Local news stations sent reporters. Business journalists from the major papers attended. Even some bloggers who covered the real estate industry showed up. I stood at a podium with Susan beside me. Behind us were charts and documents showing the timeline of Elena's fraud. I'd practiced my statement 100 times. I knew exactly what to say. Good morning. My name is Rachel Winters, and I'm the founder and CEO of Winters Development Company. I'm here today to address recent events involving my former business partner, Elena Winters. I took a breath and continued. 3 months ago, I made my sister an equal partner in my company. I trusted her completely. I gave her full access to all business accounts and operations. That trust was betrayed. Over several months, Elena engaged in systematic fraud and embezzlement. She forged contracts, stole proprietary information, and transferred company funds without authorization. She sold our project plans to competitors and attempted to sabotage ongoing developments. The reporters scribbled notes frantically. Cameras flashed. I kept my voice steady. When I discovered this betrayal, I immediately contacted law enforcement. Elena Winters and her husband Mark Daniels have been charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence against them is substantial and includes recorded confessions. They are currently awaiting trial. Someone raised their hand. Ms. Winters, how did you not notice this was happening? I'd expected this question. My sister was skilled at deception. She created false documentation. She manipulated accounting records. She exploited my trust. But the moment I received evidence of her crimes, I took action. I hired investigators. I contacted authorities. I did everything legally and ethically possible to stop her and protect my company and clients. Another reporter spoke up. What about your business? Can Winters Development survive this scandal? Not only will we survive, we'll emerge stronger, I said firmly. I've implemented new oversight procedures, I've restructured management, I've secured my investors and maintained relationships with all our major clients. The Harbor View project will move forward as planned. Winters Development has a 15-year track record of integrity and excellence. One person's criminal behavior doesn't change that fundamental truth. The questions kept coming. How much money did she steal? Are your parents involved? Will you forgive her? I answered each one carefully, sticking to facts and refusing to be drawn into emotional speculation. The press conference lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, Susan and I walked back to my private office. I collapsed into my chair, exhausted. You did great, Susan said. That was exactly the right tone. Professional, factual, sympathetic without being weak. The news coverage started immediately. By that evening, the story was everywhere. Local news ran it as their lead story. Business publications wrote articles analyzing the case. Some headlines were sympathetic. Local developer betrayed by sister. Others were more sensational. Sister scandal rocks real estate industry. 3 days later, Elena's lawyer called Susan requesting a meeting. They wanted to negotiate a plea deal. Elena would plead guilty to reduce charges in exchange for testifying against Mark and providing full documentation of everything they'd done. Susan and I met with them at her office. Elena looked terrible. She'd lost weight. Her eyes were red and hollow. When she saw me, she started crying immediately. Rachel, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't respond. I just sat down and waited for her lawyer to speak. My client deeply regrets her actions, the lawyer said. She was manipulated and controlled by her husband. She wants to make this right. She's willing to plead guilty, return all stolen funds, and cooperate fully with the prosecution of Mark Daniels. Susan looked at me. This was my decision. I could push for maximum charges, send Elena to prison for years, or I could accept the plea deal, get my money back faster, and let her face reduced consequences. I thought about our childhood, about sharing a room and trading secrets, about her being there when my marriage ended, about all the years before Mark came into her life and poisoned everything. What would the sentence be with the plea deal? I asked. 18 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years probation in community service, the lawyer said. She'd also be permanently barred from working in finance or real estate. 18 months versus potentially 10 years. It was a huge difference. But Elena had cooperated in the end. She'd admitted what happened, and Mark had been the driving force behind everything. I want full restitution first, I said. Every penny returned before any plea deal is finalized, and I want a public apology, a real one. Not written by lawyers. Elena nodded quickly. Yes, anything. I'll do anything. 2 weeks later, the funds were returned. $470,000 transferred back into company accounts. The money Gerald Thompson had paid was seized by the court and would be returned once his case was resolved. Elena's sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. Mark refused any plea deal. He insisted he'd done nothing wrong and demanded a trial. His arrogance would be his downfall. The evidence against him was overwhelming. On the day of Elena's sentencing, I sat in the courtroom. She stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit. The judge asked if she had anything to say. Elena turned to look at me. I destroyed the most important relationship in my life for money I didn't even need. I hurt the person who loved me most. I was weak and stupid and greedy. Rachel, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that losing you is the worst punishment I could ever face. Prison is easy compared to knowing I destroyed my sister's trust forever. The judge sentenced her to 18 months. Elena was led away in handcuffs. She looked back at me one more time before disappearing through the door. I didn't wave. I didn't cry. I just watched her go. Mark's trial took 3 months. I testified against him. So did Elena. The jury found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. When they read the verdict, he finally lost his composure. He screamed that it wasn't fair, that he'd been set up. The bailiffs had to drag him from the courtroom. I walked out into the sunlight, feeling something lift from my shoulders. It was over. The legal battles were finished. Justice had been served. Now I could finally focus on rebuilding, rising from the ashes. The court ordered full restitution and awarded me an additional $2 million in damages. Mark's assets were seized, his car, his house, his investment accounts. Everything he'd tried to steal from me was returned with interest. I used part of that money to buy out Elena's share of the company. The court had already voided her partnership agreement due to fraud, but I wanted it official. I paid $1 for her half of Winter's development. She signed the papers from prison without argument. For the first time in 15 years, my company was completely mine. No partners, no shared ownership, just me. I hired a new team carefully. I interviewed dozens of candidates for every position. I checked references thoroughly. I implemented strict oversight procedures. Every financial transaction required 3 separate approvals. Every contract was reviewed by both internal and external auditors. My new chief financial officer was a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to Marcus. She'd worked in corporate fraud investigation before moving into private business. She knew exactly what warning signs to watch for. Trust but verify, Patricia told me on her first day. That's our new motto. We trust our team, but we verify everything. The Harbor View project moved forward. We broke ground in April, 6 months after Elena's arrest. I stood at the construction site wearing a hard hat, watching the excavators dig the foundation. Marcus Chen stood beside me. You did it, he said. You survived something that would have destroyed most companies. I had good people helping me, I said, and I refused to give up. The local business journal ran a feature story about me titled, Rising from Betrayal, How Rachel Winters Rebuilt Her Empire. They called me resilient, determined, and an inspiration to other entrepreneurs who'd faced setbacks. The article brought in new clients. My phone started ringing with people who wanted to work with the woman who'd turned catastrophe into success. My parents eventually came around. It took almost a year, but my mother called me one day crying. I'm sorry, I was wrong to take Elena's side. What she did was terrible. I should have supported you. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was angry, but they were my parents. And holding on to that resentment wouldn't change anything. Thank you for saying that, I told my mother. I appreciate it. We started having dinner together once a month. We didn't talk about Elena. That wound was still too fresh. But slowly we rebuilt our relationship. Elena served her full 18 months. The day she was released, she called me. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the decline button. But finally I picked up. Hello? Rachel. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. I just wanted you to know I'm out. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not expecting forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm moving to Oregon. I got a job at a bookstore. I'm starting over. Okay, I said. I didn't know what else to say. Thank you for not completely destroying me, Elena said. You could have. You had every right to. But you showed me mercy. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that mercy. She hung up before I could respond. I stood holding my phone, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. I didn't forgive her. I wasn't sure I ever would. But I didn't hate her anymore either. Mostly I just felt sad for everything we'd lost. 2 years after Elena's arrest, the Harbor View apartments opened. 24 luxury units, all sold before construction even finished. It was the most successful project of my career. On opening day, I stood in the lobby surrounded by clients, investors, and my new team. Everyone was celebrating, drinking champagne, congratulating each other. I stepped outside onto the balcony overlooking the harbor. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and orange. I thought about everything I'd been through to get to this moment. The betrayal, the fear, the anger, the long nights wondering if my business would survive, the court battles, and the public exposure. But I'd made it. I'd survived the worst thing I could imagine, betrayal by someone I loved, and I'd come out stronger. My business was thriving, my reputation was solid, I had a team I trusted and clients who believed in me. Patricia joined me on the balcony. Beautiful view. Yes, it is. You know what the best part is, she said. You built this yourself. No partners, no one to share credit with or worry about. This success is entirely yours. She was right. This was my victory, earned through hard work, determination, and refusing to let betrayal define me. I'd learned that trust was precious and should be given carefully. That family didn't automatically deserve loyalty if they didn't give it in return. That sometimes the people closest to you could hurt you the most, but that didn't mean you should stop trusting everyone. I'd learned to be stronger, smarter, and more careful, but I hadn't let Elena's betrayal make me bitter or closed off. I'd built a new team, formed new relationships, and found people who deserved my trust. The Harbor View project was more than just a building. It was proof that I could survive anything. That betrayal didn't have to be the end of the story. It could be the beginning of something even better. I raised my glass to the sunset, to the building behind me, to everything I'd overcome. To rising from the ashes, I whispered. And I meant it. Moral lesson: trust is a gift that should be given carefully. But betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. When the people closest to you prove unworthy of your trust, the answer isn't to stop trusting everyone. It's to be wiser about who earns that trust. Family loyalty matters, but it can't excuse criminal behavior or fundamental betrayal. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is hold people accountable for their actions, even when it hurts. Your success and integrity are worth protecting, even from those you love. And when you survive the worst betrayal imaginable, you prove to yourself that you're stronger than any challenge life throws at you.